Okay, everyone. Hello, this is Dr. Sarita Jackson, the President and CEO of the Global Research Institute of International Trade, here with GRIIT Group Live. I am doing something different today. We have a guest, a very good friend of mine, Mr. Eddy Sumar, who is joining in this afternoon, joining our GRIIT Group Live session. And Mr. Sumar is the president and founder of ERS Consulting Services, which focuses on financial credit management. So we're going to talk about that for businesses, but he's also in a very, very important role for those of us who are focusing on exports, is he was appointed to the California Inland Empire District Export Council. So he has that expertise, many years of expertise and experience when it comes to exporting, but more importantly, when we talk about businesses and whether they're just focusing on the domestic market or the international market, it comes down to money. And so I wanted to bring an expert, someone that I've known for several years now, have watched him in action, and I'm so in awe of him. So we have Mr. Eddy Sumar here this afternoon joining us on GRIIT Group Live. Hi, Eddy.
Hi, Dr. Jackson. It's nice to be with you this afternoon.
Yes, well, thank you so much for joining us. Again, I hope that did justice in terms of your experience. We've had a number of conversations, and especially recently, talking about everything going on with the crisis and looking at what is happening for businesses in general, and particularly your small, medium-sized businesses, and we have our own small businesses, so we're also a part of that population. And so I wanted to get started with you, just to get some insight that could be very helpful to our audience. And starting with my first question here is, what are some of the challenges that you as a business owner and or your clients are facing specifically any importer exporters for your clients that you're currently facing in the wake of COVID-19?
Thank you very much for this question. In fact, we're all in this together. We're all in the same boat. What's interesting about this crisis is touching everybody. Yes, some industries are doing great. Others are really being affected greatly, but the virus doesn't understand industry. Even industries that are open, some of their members have been affected. They had to close, for example, Smithfield or the Tyson, one of the factories, and so forth. So in essence, the virus knows no color, race, state, now is under the threat of this virus. So businesses from large to small are being affected. They will be affected in different stages. Some earlier than others, but sooner or later, this virus is going to spread and continue to spread. So really, there are many challenges, such as, do we need to open? When do we open? How many are going to be brought into work? Because I'm hearing some banks, for example, they're not bringing the whole team. Some teams will stay at home. Others will go to work in the branch. They consolidated branches. Like I know there is a Citibank branch in my town. They closed one branch, took everybody from that branch to a completely different branch. Other companies, they have said, okay, we have a workforce. They thinned it because of the COVID. They have to keep social distancing. So that workforce is now 1/3 of its volume and its size. Wow, this is interesting. Everybody's being affected. But what I'm seeing here, the challenge produces two things, or gives us two things: to think about danger and the threat, but also to think about the opportunity. Because as businesses, we can't just function properly if we think of the danger only. What are the opportunities and what is the future holding? We need to think with optimism, because one thing I'm telling all people today, including myself, we can't be pessimists. We have to be optimists, because that's the challenge. How can we take the obstacle, turn it into an opportunity?
Mm-hmm. And I really like that point that you make in terms of, and that's what I'm writing down here, you know, in terms of taking the obstacles, the things that are going on right now, and then identifying the opportunities as a business owner, that identifying those opportunities, and then to actually take advantage, to strategize and figure out how you're going to actually leverage those opportunities. So that's a great point. And something else that's very interesting that you were talking about in your examples, when you look at the banks, because you're absolutely right. Whether it's the institution where my company banks, or even looking at friends in that sector where basically, yeah, they have downsized tremendously. Even though they're operating, you see that huge downsize. And so just sticking with that question, what about any of your clients in the international trade space? Any companies, whether they're manufacturers or in another completely different sector, how are they being impacted? What are you seeing there?
In fact, in the past few weeks, I was able to talk to several small businesses and even medium-sized businesses. One even of my clients, his clients are already sending him bankruptcy claims. They already filed for bankruptcy. So imagine a client of mine being presented with a proof of claim because his own client filed for bankruptcy. Another client that I have, they had to lay off the whole sales force in one of their division, 100%, because they felt that sales force depended on traveling internationally. If you cannot travel internationally, you cannot communicate, and they depend on person-to-person meetings to close deals. So they had to close the division and lay off the sales force. So that is what is happening right now. We might not hear that on the news on a daily basis. I'm not a pessimist. I'm just being a realist. This is exactly not what I'm hearing, what my clients are experiencing. Some are not going to reopen. I understand that's it. They're out of business. They're not going to come back. Even a couple of them that I know applied for the PPP and the EIDL because it didn't come on time. They were forced to shut their doors, period. There is no way that they are going to recover. I get some reports from economists and the analysts. One analyst was saying that he thinks that 30 to 40% of the small business is going to be affected. And God forbids that 30 to 40% will close. We hope not. That's one of his analysis, that 30 to 40% of the small business is going to be affected. And when I asked him, I said, what do you think? Will the economy come back roaring? He said, no way. Those that close, how can they come back roaring? They closed. In fact, I have a very good friend. She got laid off, furloughed. Now, will the company rehire her? It's not yet known. I know of other people, they already got laid off. School districts, like I had a contract with a school district. I got a phone call from them to say, Eddy, due to COVID-19, your contract has been canceled. That's it. When can we renew that? Don't even bother us until 2022. Here is a small business.
Wow.
I'm a real example. I have a contract, and now not to approach them until 2022, which means I have to go back next year, June of 2021 for the 2022 cycle. Small businesses cannot afford that, but that's the reality. So this is what is happening to the small business community. We have been decimated. This is like a war. Bombs have been thrown in a different kind. The virus is the threat, but then this shelter in place or safer at home is really like everything has stopped.
Right.
Now, what do you do? To reactivate, it might not be easy for some people to reactivate, but I'm hopeful. I'm still optimistic, but I'm wedding my optimism with reality. I'm not going to be a fool to say life will be great. I will say, as long as I'm alive, as long as I'm breathing, I'm happy. So that's really the blessing of life. We are, like my wife came up with a beautiful quote, 6 feet apart or 6 feet under. So in essence, I'm 6 feet above ground, so I'm happy. So
keep moving, right?
Yeah, we are moving, we're alive, therefore I'm happy. It doesn't matter right now because health is before business. As long as we're alive, business will come. But if we are affected, our health is affected, no business is going to bring you back to life if we are dead. So that's the message really. Are we breathing? Are we alive? We need to praise God. We need to really think positively. Tomorrow will be a better place and a better day. So.
Yeah, and that's so interesting using your story. And I was just checking on the Facebook because I really hope that if there are small business owners, whether they're manufacturing, agricultural producers, even the services sector, that people ask their questions. We have quite a number of viewers actually, so that's a good thing. At least they're tuning in. So I'm so happy to see that we have a good number of viewers. And so if they have any questions, this is the time, because that's interesting. You mentioned the EIDL, the PPP, and just that's been all in the news, but just for those who are listening, and if they're not quite sure what those are, just basically summarizing it. Each program is slightly different, but just those were the programs mentioned in the news over the last, 2-3 weeks that were supposed to provide support, financial support for the small businesses. And so, yeah, and you're absolutely right. With everything going on, it's quite chaotic, and you had mentioned a 2-year time frame. So that is really, really important to plan for however long this can take place. The other thing that I just want to highlight that you mentioned, with a lot of what we've seen with meetings, everyone's on Zoom, like we're on Zoom, right? That you're hearing a lot about virtual meetings, but you raise a really good point when you talk about the international space when you can't travel, because you still have a lot that deals are done, things that are done, better done face to face. And even I have a client that I worked with, and we had a whole timeline of what we were going to do. I got him on his project, and well, because everything shut down, a lot he can only do, he has to travel. You cannot, the work will not get done virtually using Zoom. He still has to travel, make sure what he is setting up, his business, he's setting up a physical business, that everything is running smoothly. So that's another point that I really want to highlight, because we talk about the whole digital communication, but how far does that take a particular business? So also, well, taking that information and highlighting what's going on, can you just talk a little bit about what can small and medium-sized enterprises do now financially to stay afloat during this difficult period?
Excellent. In essence, this question is really the result of what businesses did or did not do in the past. This is really the tip of the iceberg. It is the result of actions or inaction that small businesses, medium-sized or big businesses took or they didn't take. For example, what can we do now? I'm reminded really of the experience of Jonah. when he was in the Mediterranean and they got hit with a storm, what they start doing, emptying that vessel to make sure that there is not enough weight in it. Finally said, no, I'm the problem, throw me overboard so God will stop the storm. And that happened that way. What I learned from that lesson from the book of Jonah is that when we are faced with a storm that was caused by the threat of a virus like COVID-19, we need to shed the weight. So that means any company, any individual right now should say, is this expense needed or this expense a want or a desire? Shed the wants and the desires. A company, in order to stay viable, this is the time to say, what are the essentials of that company? What, like the government says, essential business stays, non-essential is going to stop. Those people shelter in place. The same thing in business. If I'm a business, I'll say, what are my costs? I will go through my income statement line by line. I might not be able to increase sales because now sales has been decimated in some or decreased, but I can look at the items that are going to be there: overhead, electricity, staff, and so forth, the SG&A, the cost of goods sold. If I still need to buy goods and sell it, I want to make sure that I'm getting my volume discounts, better pricing, and so forth. So in essence, this is the time to look at the P&L, the profit and loss statement, the income statement, line by line with an X-ray vision, with a CAT scan approach, an MRI, and say, is every item here, every line on this statement is needed by the company or not? How can I decrease that expense or neutralize it or even eliminate it? So this is the time to shed off the weight. Otherwise, a small business will not stay long in business. You just mentioned the programs, whether it's PPP, the payroll protection program, or the EIDL, the economic injury disaster loan. Those are really gifts. This is really amazing. It took an act of Congress for the small business to be helped. Just think about it. Before COVID, if a business was not doing well financially, they're on their own. No government is going to give them a PPP or an EIDL because there is no disaster. Maybe they are in a disaster through their decision-making process in the business, but no government is going to rescue you. There is no gift from the government to be forgiven. So in reality, a gift is given to the small business community through the PPP and EIDL. But the sad thing, not every small business will be able to take advantage, because even the new tranche that is being approved will not be enough. We hope there will be a third and a fourth and a fifth. So at least all these 30 million small businesses in America might be able to get something. That's the only way to satisfy the small business community, is all the small businesses got a PPP or an EIDL and so forth. But sad to say, it's first come, first served program. But just imagine if these small businesses, and we'll discuss that in another question, is I will show you how these businesses would have been in a better place today if they thought about the future event. Because every small business has to think strategically, think holistically, not think of the present moment, but think of tomorrow and the future. So really, what small business need to do now is look at the reality check, make sure that all the items on their income statement is really needed, and then look at the balance sheet. Look at your assets, look at your liabilities, and look at your net worth. And go, like for example, if I have inventory, when I look at my balance sheet, is the inventory viable or is it obsolete? Because obsolete inventory, you have to throw it. It's only scrap. You might even get a cent for it sometimes. But if you have inventory, are you able to quickly turn it into sales? And then if you sold on credit, is your accounts receivable of high quality? This is the time to say, I wish I sold based on good credit fundamentals, because having receivables on a book doesn't mean you are going to collect it. So again, it requires foresight. It requires, before you build those receivables, you should have thought about the customer, the quality of that receivable, the terms that you give, and that you're going to be able to collect it on a timely manner. So really, I will look at every section of my assets, and then at the liability. Then this is really a time to think, did I need that loan? Why am I paying interest and principal on a loan that now it's creating a burden on me? Did I buy long-term asset with short-term loan? Or did I buy a short-term asset with a long-term loan? You see, if you bought a long-term asset with a short-term loan, all of a sudden you have to pay the loan. Wait a minute, you don't have enough money to cover it. It's like buying a house. Instead of over 30-year mortgage, you buy, oh, I'll pay it off in 5 years. That is insane.
Right.
An item that requires to be paid off over 30 years, you buy it with a loan that is 30-year term, because you can always pay it off sooner if you don't have early penalty clause. But you can never take a 10-year mortgage and make it 15 or 20 or 30 in a time like this. No bank is going to say, wait a minute, fine, okay, you can't afford it now, I'm going to increase it. That's not going to be easy. As a credit professional, I will always tell my clients, go for the longest term and highest credit limit first. You can always come down, but it will be harder to go from a shorter term or a lower limit to a higher one if the economic condition changes, or if your credit standing does not support it.
And that's an excellent point, because, you know, so with everything that you were saying, and you segued into the point that I was going to make, which I really love, is that it's basic, right? And that's why the title of this was, you know, business finance before, during, and after crisis. And the reason why I named it that and wanted to talk to you, especially after many of our conversations in the midst of everything that was going on, it seemed like it's just going back to basics. you see a lot of things going out there, how to manage your finances in the crisis. I know the economy has changed. It's going to be significantly different, but the basics remain the same in terms of how you run your business from a financial perspective. And so crisis or no crisis, looking at your balance sheet, and the same in your personal life. You're looking at your assets versus your liabilities and making sure that you have that cash flow. So that, is a really good point. And the key thing that I want to highlight, that is just going back to basics, right? And let's see you kind of touched on what they can do now financially, and then it also talked about how they can be prepared for any crisis, for future crisis. It comes back to the basics, and that's where Eddy comes in, where he can help you with that, to really get down to the nitty-gritty, as opposed to a lot of the things that I'm seeing out there as if it's something new. No, it's just going back to basic financial literacy, right? And so that's one component that is really, really good. Now, do you have any tips if someone comes in and they say, well, I'm in agriculture, I'm in the agricultural sector, or I'm a manufacturer, or I'm in the services sector? Are there any specific tips for the different sectors?
Here I will use the 80-20 rule. There is always 80% foundational. All businesses, all sectors are going to follow. But then there's 20% that is going to be industry specific, sector specific, and even company specific. Because I always say no two companies in an industry are the same. No two customers in a company are the same. And even the customer, no two deals for the same customer are the same. Life is situational, things will change. My tip is this: all companies in all sectors need to understand the value of due diligence. Understanding first, not only your company, your product, your services that you're offering, understanding the industry, but every company should understand the power of preparation and strategic planning. When I worked for the Rainbird Corporation, they're amazing. They have first-rate best practice. And I used to be involved in the strategic meetings, representing the credit and collection and finance department. Every manager, we attended the strategic planning for maybe a week, sometimes 2 weeks, and then we had 5 times a year strategic updates. Why? Because we needed to know every time we meet, what's the vision, mission, the values of the company, what are we selling? And then we envision Rainbird, let's say, when I got hired there in 1995, we envisioned Rainbird in the year 2000, the year 2005, and the year 2010. We look 5, 10, 15 years into the future. Why? In order to prevent blind spots, like imagine for this COVID, if you are in the manufacturing, the agriculture, first make sure that you have your strategic planning in place. You understand what you need. A good strategic plan is going to be encompassing every part and parcel of the company. Within the strategic plan, you're going to have a plan for operation, a plan for sales and marketing, a plan for finance. Under finance, you have credit, collection, and so forth. So in essence, you're going to have really segmented strategic plan that is going to help you look at the future. And also, every strategic plan should include an if scenario. If the economy continues to, according to the status quo, these are the steps in the plan. Should it change, we are going to take this. So we need to do a PESEL analysis, understand the political, the economic, the sociocultural, the technological, the legal, and the environmental. And here, think about environmental. This virus came from the environment. So in essence, did we think if one day there is a pandemic, will I be able to survive as an agriculture entity, manufacturer, or a service-oriented? Think about the service-oriented, the hotels, the cruise industry, the airline industry, anything that touches the service industry came to a complete halt right now. But if they thought that if there is a pandemic, what could prevent pandemic? Maybe it's not like washy-washy when you go to a cruise and you wash your hands. Maybe they should have thought beyond just that. They ask about your temperature, but maybe they needed to measure it when you come on board rather than just putting it on a form and so forth. But in hindsight, did they have the plans Did they have strategic plans, not just any plans, strategic plans with contingency? The next thing that I will tell these sections, now because there is a pandemic, the good news, each company should look towards local government, state government, and federal government. What are the programs? For example, I'm a member of the CDAC. And I get a lot of emails from different members and from the Department of Commerce, from SBA, the International Trade Administration, Exim Bank. In fact, today I listened on an Exim Bank webinar telling us about the different programs that Exim Bank is offering to companies involved in international trade. And one thing amazing that I never seen in the past, I've been in this field 30 plus years. For the first time, Exim Bank has relaxed some of the requirements for multi-buyer and single buyer policy holders. They relaxed, now they say you can even file a claim early. Some policies will have, let's say, 240-day waiting period. Now they said you can go ahead and file early because they know that a small business who has a legitimate claim cannot wait that 240 days or 180 days and so forth. They relaxed even the reporting requirements. They added a 30-day extension on this, 30-day extension on that. So which means any company, like if I were in the agriculture sector, the first thing I say, what is the Department of Agriculture? Do they have anything that can help my sector, especially in international? I know that the Foreign Agriculture Service in different embassies, I used to meet with them when I worked at Rainbird because I was in charge of Rainbird Ag, also the credit and finance for that. I met with them. So they tell me what programs do they offer for agricultural distributors, for farmers, for companies. The same thing in manufacturing. Check the government program. Second, check the chambers of commerce because chambers of commerce have their fingers on the pulse. Also, there are associations. I'm in credit. I belong to the National Association of Credit Management. I belong to the NSCM Commercial Services of Oregon. I belong to the Credit Management Association of California and so forth, because industry groups also have the fingers on the pulse. They might know about standards, about things that are happening in that industry. So what companies need to know is, if I'm in the manufacturing, do I belong to the Manufacturer Council? Look at the associations. But even manufacturers, you have the steels, you have the boilers, you have, so in essence, each segment within the manufacturing industry has its own association, has its own, like the API, the American Petroleum Institute. That means if you are in the oil and gas, you want to know what the API is saying. So that's the first thing you want to do is, if I belong to any of these services sectors, I need to say, first, what is government going to do to help me? Second, what are the chambers of commerce in my area can help me with? Local government, associations, industry groups, industry journals, and even the web. If I were a company and I need something today, you can Google anything. I can say I'm a small business. I need to know if there is anything, and start going through Google and through the web and find the information. So really, we need to become creative and resourceful. There is somewhere out there is some information. We need to prospect and find it. So there is no instant gratification. Today, we have to make an effort. Yes, we have social media, but also we need to know the real information. Because I'm a research consultant. I can tell you there's a lot of bad information out there. Yeah. My job for my clients is to sift through all the bad information. Just imagine a CFO asking for something. The CFO can't waste his time or her time to try to find. But as a consultant, I know how to sift quickly the bad from the good, from the ugly. And then when I present my report, I'm behind it. I know that that report is really true. There is no fake information because I have a method how to sift through the information. I'll investigate the source. I will even try to find more than one source of coverage. And then I will test the validity of every source. If I hear this is the information, I'll also do the 80-20 rule for everything. If I go through 3 different sources, the first thing I'll say, what are the commonalities among all these sources? If they all 3 agree, then I say that's fundamental truth. Then I'll find the converging points. Then I start saying, does it make sense or not? and then I will test it from other sources. So that's the scientific method. I'm not going to accept one source to tell me this is what is happening. I want to hear it from multiple sources from different part of the world. Because even in America, if you try to get the news from American sources, you only have the American perspective. You go to BBC, Sky News, you get the British perspective. You go to DW, you get the German perspective. Le Journal 24, you get the French perspective. RT, Russian Today, you get the Russian perspective. You go to Al Jazeera, Al Arabiya, you get the Arabic perspective. In essence, I have to look at all the world and said, what is the world saying on this particular subject? Find the common grounds, and then look at the different perspectives, and then you make the decision what makes sense based on scientific fact, not opinions.
So the research, right. So the research becomes very, very important. So the research becomes very, very important, especially for our clients. And that's why you and I click, because that's how we are in terms of the work that we do. And I just want to back up to some of the things that you had mentioned with the different types of resources and that's a lot of the information. That's why we do these GRIIT Group Live, to present different resources to the business owners, and particularly those in the area of international trade. But as you mentioned, there's so many resources out there, whether they're at the governmental level, federal, state, local, and then you have the chambers, different resources. And so the key thing, just to sum up everything that you've said, is to know how to sift through those resources, but also to navigate the resources. And one of them that you mentioned, which was going to get to another question that I had, was, and which you've already answered, about what you're seeing in terms of the ability to access export financing. And Exim Bank is one of those resources. Also the Small Business Administration, the SBA, for the small businesses, that they do have the resources. And then, as Eddy mentioned, that with the Exim Bank, where the rules have been lax. So it's very important to stay up to date as to what's going on, but not only to stay up to date, because one of the things I just want to add to that with my clients is, okay, how do you sift through all of this? If I go to the one agency over here, for example, a couple of weeks ago, I had a conversation, and this related to funding for doing overseas projects. How do I get contracts? How do I get grants? Well, each agency will be slightly different. So and because I've had that experience going through different federal government agencies to get funding for overseas projects, you have to understand that and know how to navigate. So that's the key takeaway that I want to just get from that last point. And as we wrap up, I just want to ask, is there anything else that you feel is very important that you would like to add for the benefit of our audience?
Definitely. One thing I will always tell people, think before you act, think holistically and strategically, and then try to ensure your transactions. Like, that's why, as a credit professional, I made sure every company that I worked at or I'm consulting with, I'm a proponent of credit insurance, trade credit insurance, because just imagine, an Exim Bank is a great resource for small businesses, from the premium wise, and even now with the programs that they have, from working capital to multi-buyer to single buyer, Exim Bank is a great source. Even one of my clients uses Exim Bank and he's very happy with them. And yes, the private sector has, but guess what? When situations like this happen, the private sector is more quickly to stop. Like, I'll give you, when I was working with Argentina and Brazil, like in 1997 and 1998, when the Brazilian real devaluated, and later when the Argentina collapsed, immediately the private credit insurance said Argentina and Brazil are off cover. Exim Bank will do the same, but this time, what amazes me, Exim Bank says, I'm going to relax. I want to help you. But the good news about credit insurance, an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. Every small business should think very seriously about having credit insurance, especially if you export, and even there is domestic credit insurance, because in a situation like this, better than business interruption insurance, because now the insurance saying, oh, business interruption, this virus is not part of it. Now they are trying to really appeal to administration to tell the insurance companies to consider COVID as that it's a business interruption. And they said no. They want the government to give the small business the PPP and the IDLE, not the insurance company. But if you had trade credit insurance and you had receivables approved by EXIM and so forth, and this happened, you are going to be paid for that. So you make sure, because you are really securing the commercial transaction. So, and make sure also you ask the right now, you can ask insurer, if in the future a pandemic happens, will I be paid? Will business interruption be paid and so forth? So this is another lesson. Have insurance, because if you are insured, now try to find insurance, it's not that easy.
Right.
Nobody's going to insure you when the ship is sinking, but people will insure you when the ship is floating beautifully and the winds are with us. But the moment the winds turn, the insurance is going to stop unless Congress says, okay, yeah, you need to do that. So yeah, insurance is key because you don't know what the future holds. So if anything, I want to think of credit insurance as an option for international trade or for domestic trade.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Eddy. And before we actually log off, I have to say hello. We have a few people here. Hannah Hernandez, loving this. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us live. Ferdinand Soriano, hello. Nice to see you. And Quinte Ferguson that have joined on. And we have a number of viewers that are watching us. So I'm so glad that those of you who are here, thank you so much for joining us live, getting this great wealth of information from Mr. Eddy Sumar. And join us in 2 weeks. Let me look at my calendar here. We have 2 weeks, Thursday, 4:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, GRIIT Group Live. So just, you'll see an announcement, but I want to thank again Mr. Eddy Sumar, who is the president and founder of ERS Consulting Services, and also the member of the California Inland Empire District Export Council. So as you can see, he knows what he's talking about, and we're going to have more of these conversations. So just continue to follow the Facebook page. If you aren't already, if you're just guesting, go ahead, like it so you can continue to get this information. So thank you so much, Eddy, for all of that information.
Thank you, Sarita. It's a pleasure to be on your show. So we'll talk in the future more.
Yes. Okay. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.